In this next video, we're going to talk about the brain areas and neurotransmitters that promote REM sleep. During REM sleep, we see a lot of changes in brain function. So we're going to start off first talking about areas where we see increases in activity. And one of the first areas that we see an increase in activity are the pons. And it triggers the onset of REM sleep. And you're going to see on the next slide that the pons are critical in these, in what are called PGO waves that are characteristic of REM sleep. Another area we see an increase in activity is the limbic system. Now, we didn't talk much about the limbic system when we talked about the anatomy section. That's because sometimes people don't really think we should lump this whole area together. However, and in different textbooks, you'll see different brain regions sometimes associated with the limbic system. But the limbic system is thought to be a group of brain regions that kind of work together to promote our emotions. And those are things like the olfactory bulb, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the cingulate gyrus. And so it's just, again, these different brain regions that work together and are thought to have some sort of control over our emotional systems. We also see an increase in the parietal cortex and the temporal cortex. So, and some of this will be kind of important when we come back and we talk about the theories of why we have, why we dream, why we sleep, those types of different things. So we also have decreases in activity. And the areas that we see decreases in activity are the primary visual cortex, the motor cortex, and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. So again, we come back and talk about some functions of why we sleep and why we dream. Some of these areas where we see an increase in activity and decreases in activity will become important. REM sleep is also characterized by what are called PGO waves, which is what I mentioned on the previous slide. So what do we think the P stands for from that, based on that previous slide? Yes, the pons. So again, we see waves of activity detected in this order, PGO. So it starts with pons, and so the pons here also, as we saw on the previous slide, stimulate that REM activity brain activity to start. And then the next, what do you think that G stands for? What do we see here? This is the geniculate. Everyone say that, the geniculate. And so that is the G in the PGO waves. And then the O is the occipital cortex. And so again, these characteristic waves that start in the pons, then go to the geniculate, and then to the occipital cortex. REM is also regulated by neurotransmitters. So serotonin is going to inhibit REM sleep. That's why I have it here in red. And acetylcholine is going to stimulate REM sleep. So drugs that simulate acetylcholine are going to induce REM sleep, and drugs that simulate serotonin would block REM sleep. And important also to note that serotonergic cells, so cells that produce serotonin, they fire less in slow wave sleep, and they actually stop activity altogether in REM sleep. So in terms of REM sleep and the function of REM sleep, one thing that we do know is that species vary in the amount of time they spend in REM sleep. So from species to species, we vary in the amount of time we spend in REM sleep. Now, we can look at the amount of time an animal spends in sleep, though, and predict how much time they'll spend in REM sleep. And that's because the percentage of REM sleep is positively correlated with the total amount of sleep in most animals. So continuing on with the discussion of what the function of REM sleep is, we'll touch on a few theories that might be involved. However, just keep in mind that this research is inconclusive, and we really don't know still exactly what the function of REM sleep is. We'll also come back and talk about some of these theories that I'm going to mention when later in the lecture when we talk about the general function of sleep as well as the function of dreams. So there is some research that suggests that memory consolidation might occur during REM sleep. Perhaps the brain is using REM sleep to discard useless connections. Learned motor skills might be consolidated during REM sleep. If you think about it during your dreams, you're kind of acting out something that you've learned previously. We know if you deprive someone from sleep early in the night, memory for a simple list of words decreases. However, if you deprive them of sleep later in the night, learned motor skills are more impaired. So we know that there's different disruptions in different types of memory during different times of the night. However, drugs that impair REM don't impair memory. So that's kind of the catch-22, suggesting that maybe there's something a little bit more going on there. Another theory that was thrown out there in 1998 was that the function of REM is simply to shake the eyeballs back and forth to provide sufficient oxygen to the corneas. I think this one's kind of funny, but I kind of like it too, because we have more REM sleep later on in the night, and so that's when our eyeballs are shaking back and forth. And if you think about it, that time later in the night is going to be when perhaps our eyes start to run out of oxygen and we need them. I also like it because I feel like when I wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning and I haven't, either felt like I had a lot of dreams or something, that my eyes tend to hurt. And so maybe I didn't get my eyes shaking back and forth enough. Another one that I think is kind of interesting is this evolutionary defense mechanism. And so the idea is that it's related to something called tonic immobility. And so do you know what that is? I guess is the question, is what tonic immobility is. Something that is a defense mechanism in other species, and the idea is that perhaps we just inherited it. And that's why, remember, those pons send signals to our postural muscles that inhibit them. So, well, do we know what this animal is? It's a possum. And so what does a possum do when they're scared? They have this tonic immobility where they look like they're dead. So this animal, it looks like it's dead, but it's not. It's just playing possum. And so that perhaps we have this REM sleep where our pons are inhibiting our muscles, but our brain seems like it's much more active because we inherited this from another, our ancestors. So here, just to end this shorter video with a little meme, says, "A girl told me my body was like REM sleep. It makes her eyes go crazy."